The alarm hit at 6:47 a.m., that sharp metallic shriek that cuts through your bones and tells you something's about to go very wrong. I was checking the morning pressure readings when Reed Coleman walked into the control room like he owned the place, which I guess he did now. "Shut it down, Owen," he said. "Not even looking at the flashing warning lights. Turn off the gas monitoring system. We're running behind schedule, and I need this production line moving." I'm Owen Fisher, 49 years old, and I've been working at this chemical plant for 23 years. Before that, I spent 6 years in the Marines, learned a few things about what happens when you cut corners with dangerous equipment. The kind of lessons that stick with you, especially when you've seen what an explosion can do to the guys standing next to you. Back in '98, I was stationed outside Fallujah when an IED took out half my squad. Jimmy Martinez and Tony Rodriguez, good Marines both, died because someone didn't follow proper sweep protocols. Ever since then, I've had this thing about safety procedures. Call it obsessive, call it paranoid, but I sleep better at night knowing the systems I'm responsible for won't hurt anybody. "Ride, we've got pressure building up in Sector 7, I said, tapping the gauge with my finger. "EPA inspection starts in 4 hours. If we bypass the monitoring system now, I don't want to hear it." He was already pulling out his phone, probably to text his boss about how he was solving production delays. This is exactly why we brought in new management. You old-timers get so stuck on procedures that you forget we're running a business here. Reed Coleman, 32 years old, MBA from some fancy school, been with us for exactly 3 months. Came in talking about efficiency optimization and lean manufacturing. What he didn't understand was that some procedures exist because without them, people die. The guy had never worked a day on a plant floor in his life. His hands were soft, manicured, the kind that had never touched anything rougher than a keyboard. He wore expensive suits and checked his Apple Watch every few minutes, like he had somewhere more important to be. Which maybe he did, considering how this was all going to play out. I looked at the monitoring panel. Gas levels in the yellow zone, climbing toward red. The system was designed to automatically vent excess pressure, but only if the monitoring sensors stayed active. Shut them down, and we'd be flying blind during the most dangerous part of the shift change. "Reed, listen to me. We bypass this system, and if there's a leak during the EPA walkthrough, are you questioning my authority here?" His voice got that edge supervisors use when they think somebody's challenging them, "because I can make some calls about your pension review. Your daughter's college fund. How's Rachel doing, by the way? Senior year, right. Expensive time. That stopped me cold." Rachel Fisher, my kid, 17 years old, and smarter than both of us put together. She'd been accepted to state for chemical engineering, wanted to follow in her old man's footsteps, but do it better. The tuition payment was due in 6 weeks, and after the divorce, my finances were stretched tight enough to break. My ex-wife Sandra got the house in the settlement along with half my pension. Not that I blame her. 23 years of shift work, missing dinners, falling asleep during Rachel's school plays because I'd been pulling doubles to make overtime. Marriage takes 2 people, and I wasn't holding up my end, but Rachel, she never held it against me. Even after the divorce, she'd spend her weekends at my apartment, helping me figure out her college applications. Smart as a whip, that girl. Already talking about designing better safety systems for chemical plants, making sure workers like her old man don't have to choose between following dangerous orders and keeping their jobs. The tuition at state was $18,000 a year, and with room and board, we were looking at close to $25,000. My divorce lawyer had been real clear about my obligations. I could cover half if I kept my current position and didn't miss any payments on my other debts. Lose this job, and Rachel's dreams went down with it. I need a clear answer, Owen. Are you shutting down that monitoring system or not? I walked over to the control panel. The pressure gauges were still climbing. That slow, steady rise that meant somewhere in the maze of pipes and tanks, gas was accumulating faster than it should. In the Marines, we had a saying, the equipment doesn't lie, but people do all the time. Behind me, I could hear Reed tapping his foot, that impatient rhythm rich kids use when they think the help is taking too long. He'd been doing this for 3 months now, making decisions about systems he didn't understand, overruling people who'd been keeping this plant running since before he graduated high school. The thing is, I could have explained about gas accumulation rates, could have walked him through the EPA regulations that required continuous monitoring during shift changes, could have reminded him that 85 people worked in this plant, most of them with families depending on their paychecks and all of them trusting that the safety systems would keep them alive. But Reed had made it clear he wasn't interested in explanations. He'd told me in our first meeting that my focus on legacy protocols was holding back innovation. Said we needed to stay agile instead of getting bogged down in bureaucracy. The guy had read too many business books and not enough accident reports. You want me to shut down the gas monitoring system 4 hours before an EPA inspection? I want you to follow orders. This plant has been coddled by safety protocols for too long. It's time to run it like a real business. So I started the shutdown sequence. The monitoring system went dark one sensor at a time. Gas detection offline. Pressure alerts disabled. Emergency ventilation controls switched to manual only. Each step felt like disconnecting a lifeline, but I documented every single action in the shift log. Gas monitoring system disabled per management instruction, 60:52 a.m. Wednesday, I wrote. Supervisor Reed Coleman confirmed bypass order twice during shift change window. Pressure readings at time of shutdown. Sector 7 showing 340 psi, yellow zone climbing toward red threshold of 400 psi. Reed was already walking away, phone pressed to his ear, probably telling someone how he'd finally dealt with the dinosaur who was slowing down progress. He had that satisfied look people get when they think they've won an argument. Through the control room window, I could see him gesturing with his free hand, no doubt explaining to whoever was listening how modern management principles were transforming our outdated operation. I sat there looking at the dead monitoring panel, 23 years at this plant, and I'd never seen those safety systems go dark during an active production cycle. It felt wrong in a way that went deeper than procedures or regulations, like watching someone remove the brakes from a car and then floor the accelerator. The shift change started at 7:15s. Day crew coming in, night crew heading out, 40 people moving through the plant floor, while gas levels climbed in Sector 7. Without the monitoring system, we had no way to track pressure buildup or detect leaks until someone literally smelled gas in the air. Mason Reed, our union safety coordinator, stopped by the control room around 7:30. Mason had been with the company for 15 years, worked his way up from general laborer to shift supervisor. He was the guy workers went to when management tried to cut corners on safety protocols. Owen heard Reed shut down the monitoring system this morning. That true? It's all documented in the shift log, I said, pointing to the entry I'd made. Full shutdown at 6:52, confirmed twice. Mason read over my shoulder, shaking his head. Man's got no idea what he's playing with. You know the EPA's coming today, right? Supposed to be here at 11. Reed said they called this morning, running early. This is bad, Owen, real bad. If there's an incident during the inspection, Mason didn't need to finish the sentence. We both knew what happened to plants that had safety violations during federal inspections. Fines, shutdowns, criminal charges for management. 85 people looking for work in a town where the chemical plant was the biggest employer. I checked the manual pressure gauges every 10 minutes. Old-fashioned analog dials that didn't connect to any computer system. Just mechanical indicators that showed what was happening inside the pipes. By 8:30, the readings were in the red zone. The manual gauges were something my mentor, old Pete Kowalski, had insisted we keep when the plant modernized back in 2010. Pete had worked here for 40 years, survived the explosion in '87 that killed 2 workers and hospitalized 6 others. He used to tell me that digital systems were fine, but you always needed backup analog instruments that couldn't be hacked, couldn't be overridden by management, and couldn't lie to you about what was really happening. Trust your instruments, Pete used to say. They don't have meetings, they don't have budgets, and they don't give a damn about quarterly profits. They just tell you the truth. By 9:15, I was watching those analog dials like a hawk. Pressure in Sector 7 had climbed to 410 psi, well into the danger zone. The automated system would have started emergency venting procedures at 380. Without it, we were relying on manual oversight and hoping nobody made a mistake. That's when Jennifer Stone, our plant manager, came into the control room carrying a clipboard and wearing that expression managers get when they're about to deliver bad news. Oh, when? EPA inspectors just called. They're running early. They'll be here in 90 minutes instead of this afternoon. I looked at the pressure gauges. Red zone and climbing. Without the gas monitoring system, we had no automated safety response. No early warning alarms, no emergency venting protocols. Jennifer, we need to talk. Reed ordered me to shut down the gas monitoring system this morning. Pressure's building up in Sector 7, and without the sensors, She stopped writing on her clipboard. He did what? Full system shutdown at 6:52. It's all documented in the shift log. Jennifer Stone had been plant manager for 8 years, worked her way up from quality control. She understood how the safety systems worked and what happened when you disabled them during production cycles. She also understood what happened to plant managers when EPA inspectors found safety violations. Where is Reed now? Conference call with regional management. Something about production targets. She looked at the dead monitoring panel, then at the analog pressure gauges showing red across the board. Her face went pale as she realized what we were looking at. Owen, how bad is this? Bad. We've got 85 people on the floor, no automated gas detection, and EPA inspectors arriving during peak pressure buildup. If there's a leak. I didn't get to finish the sentence. At exactly 10:43 a.m., the plant evacuation alarm went off. Not the standard shift alarm or the brake signal. The emergency evacuation alarm that means everybody stops what they're doing and gets out of the building as fast as possible. Someone on the floor had smelled gas. Through the control room windows, I could see workers streaming out of the plant buildings, hard hats bobbing as they moved toward the parking lot muster points. The EPA inspector's van was just pulling through the front gate, arriving right on schedule to witness 85 chemical plant workers evacuating their workplace. Mason Reed was on the radio immediately, coordinating the evacuation. All personnel to emergency muster points. This is not a drill. Sector 7 gas leak reported. All personnel evacuate immediately. Jennifer was already on her phone with the fire department. Chemical plant emergency evacuation. Possible gas leak in progress. EPA inspectors on site. And Reed Coleman came running into the control room still holding his phone, his face white as paper. What the hell is happening? Gas leak in Sector 7, I said, not looking away from the pressure gauges. Pressure buildup reached critical levels about 20 minutes ago. Why didn't the monitoring system catch it? I turned to look at him straight on because you ordered me to shut it down. Remember? This morning at 6:52. His face went from white to green, but I thought, I didn't know it would. It's all in the shift log. Your order, my confirmation, timestamps for everything. Lisa Rodriguez, the EPA lead inspector, was already walking across the parking lot toward our emergency command trailer. She had that purposeful stride federal inspectors use when they smell a major violation. Behind her, 2 junior inspectors were setting up equipment to measure air quality and document the scene. Jennifer was on the radio with the emergency response team. All personnel evacuated. Gas levels detected at 400 parts per million in Sector 7, requesting immediate EPA notification and hazmat response. EPA's already here. Mason called from the trailer entrance. They want to talk to whoever's in charge of plant operations. Riyadh looked around like he was hoping someone else would volunteer for that conversation. But Jennifer pointed straight at him. That would be you, Reed. You're the operations manager. The next hour was like watching a car accident in slow motion. Lisa Rodriguez went through our shift logs line by line, documented every safety protocol, interviewed workers about what they'd seen and heard. Her junior inspectors took air quality readings, photographed the evacuation, and compiled a report that was going to cost somebody their job. Mason Reed gathered the union workers in the parking lot for an emergency meeting. 85 people standing around in their work clothes, worried about their jobs, their families, their futures. Most of these guys had been with the company for 10, 15, 20 years. They'd survived economic downturns, ownership changes, and previous management screw-ups, but federal safety violations were different. That kind of thing could shut down a plant permanently. Listen up, Mason said to the crowd. EPA is conducting their investigation. Nobody talks to inspectors without union representation present. We all know what happened here, and it wasn't anybody on the floor making dangerous decisions. Tony Castellanos, one of our senior operators, raised his hand. Mason, how bad is this? Are we looking at criminal charges? Could be willful violation of federal safety regulations during an EPA inspection. That's the kind of thing prosecutors love. Makes them look tough on corporate crime. The workers started murmuring among themselves. Families to support, mortgages to pay, kids in college. These weren't corporate executives with golden parachutes. These were working people who depended on steady paychecks and health insurance. Meanwhile, Reed was in the EPA trailer trying to explain himself to Lisa Rodriguez. Through the windows, I could see him gesturing frantically, probably claiming this was all some kind of misunderstanding. His expensive suit was wrinkled now, sweat stains under his arms despite the cool morning air. "Mr. Fisher," Lisa called from the trailer. "Can you join us, please?" I walked over and stepped inside. Reed was sitting at a folding table, legal pad in front of him covered with notes and crossed out lines. Lisa had her tablet out, official EPA documentation forms already filled in. "I need you to walk me through exactly what happened this morning," she said. I pulled out my shift log and set it on the table. At 6:47 a.m., pressure alarms indicated buildup in Sector 7. At 6:52 a.m., Mr. Coleman instructed me to shut down the gas monitoring system. I confirmed the order twice before executing it. Lisa read through my documentation, checking timestamps against EPA regulations. "Mr. Fisher, did you inform Mr. Coleman of the potential consequences of shutting down monitoring during an active production cycle?" I told him we had pressure building up in Sector 7. I explained that EPA inspection was scheduled for this afternoon. He said he didn't want to hear it. Reed jumped in. "That's taking it out of context." I was trying to address production delays. "I didn't realize." "You didn't realize that disabling safety monitoring would be dangerous?" Lisa's voice was flat, professional, but I could hear the disbelief underneath. "This was a miscommunication. Owen should have explained the risks more clearly." I opened my shift log to the previous month's entries. August 15th, safety meeting. Discussed gas monitoring protocols with all supervisors. August 22nd, email to management regarding EPA inspection preparation. September 3rd, written memo about critical systems that cannot be shut down during production cycles. Lisa took pictures of each entry with her tablet. "Mr. Coleman, did you receive these communications?" Reed's lawyer, who'd arrived sometime during the evacuation, leaned over and whispered something in his ear. Reed nodded and said, "I decline to answer that question at this time. The investigation continued for 6 weeks. EPA issued a preliminary report citing willful violation of federal safety regulations. The company was fined $2.8 million and placed on probationary status. Reed was terminated immediately and later charged with criminal negligence under the Clean Air Act, but that's not the end of the story. 2 weeks after Reed got fired, the union held a confidence vote about plant safety leadership. Mason Reed organized it, said the workers deserved a say in who was responsible for keeping them safe. The vote was 83-2 in favor of promoting me to plant safety director. The 2 dissenting votes came from Reed's buddies in accounting who didn't work on the plant floor and probably didn't understand what had actually happened. Trevor Davis, one of the senior operators, stood up during the union meeting and said something I'll never forget. "Owen Fisher's been looking out for us for 23 years. He documented everything, followed orders when he had to, but made sure the truth came out when it mattered. That's the kind of guy we want making safety decisions." Jennifer Stone called me into her office the next morning. "Owen, I've got good news and better news. The good news is you're our new plant safety director. The better news is it comes with a 40% salary increase and full authority over all safety systems and protocols." That 40% raise meant Rachel's tuition was covered, with money left over for books, housing, and maybe even a little spending cash. It meant I could start saving for that fishing cabin I'd been wanting, a place to take Rachel, and maybe someday her kids when they're old enough to hold a fishing rod. But more than that, it meant 85 families could sleep better, knowing their workplace was run by people who understood the difference between cutting costs and cutting corners. Rachel called me that night from her dorm room, practically bouncing off the walls with excitement. She'd heard about my promotion through the local news coverage, which had picked up the story of Reed's arrest and the EPA investigation. "Dad, I'm so proud of you," she said. "My engineering professor was talking about your case in class today. He said what you did was a textbook example of how proper documentation and following protocols can protect both workers and companies from negligent management." "Just did my job, kiddo." "No, you did more than that. You stood up for what was right, even when it could have cost you everything." That's the kind of person I want to be when I'm working in the field. Rachel had always been smart, but college was sharpening her thinking in ways that impressed me. She was taking environmental engineering courses, studying how to design safety systems that were both effective and efficient. Her professors were loading her up with case studies of industrial accidents, teaching her to think about the human cost of cutting corners on safety. "I've been thinking about what I want to do after graduation," she said. "Maybe work for EPA, help investigate companies that put profits ahead of people. Or maybe design better monitoring systems that can't be overridden by managers who don't understand the risks." That made me smile. My daughter, following in my footsteps but planning to do it better. Making sure future Owen fishers wouldn't have to choose between following dangerous orders and protecting their families. The fishing cabin purchase went through 3 months later. Nothing fancy, just a small place on Miller Lake about 2 hours north of town. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a deck overlooking the water where Rachel and I could cast lines and talk about life. The down payment came from my promotion bonus, and the monthly payments were easily covered by my new salary. We spent our first weekend there in November, after Rachel's midterm exams. She'd grown up fishing with me when she was little, before the divorce and all the complications that came with it. Being back on the water together felt like recovering something we'd lost. "Tell me about the new safety systems you're installing at the plant," she said, casting her line toward a promising spot near the fallen tree. I'd been working with Jennifer Stone and our engineering team to completely overhaul the monitoring systems. New sensors that couldn't be disabled without multiple authorization codes. Redundant backup systems that operated independently. Automated emergency protocols that triggered regardless of what management wanted. "We're calling it the Fisher Protocol," I said. "Triple redundancy on all critical safety systems. Management can override individual alerts, but they can't shut down monitoring completely without going through a formal safety review process that takes 48 hours. So no more Reed Coleman shutting down gas detection 4 hours before EPA inspections." "Exactly. And we've got documentation requirements that would make a lawyer proud. Every override attempt gets logged automatically and sent to EPA, the Union Safety Committee, and corporate headquarters simultaneously." Rachel reeled in her line and cast again, this time landing her bait right where the bass were feeding. "What happened to Reed, anyway?" "I heard he got arrested, but then the news coverage kind of disappeared. Reed's trial had been the talk of the county for about 6 weeks. Criminal negligence under the Clean Air Act, willful violation of federal safety regulations, reckless endangerment of 85 workers. His lawyers had tried to argue that he was just following corporate efficiency directives, but the prosecution had my shift logs, EPA documentation, and testimony from every worker who'd been on the floor that day. Got 2 years in federal prison, plus $50,000 in personal fines. His MBA didn't help him much when the judge explained that ignorance of safety regulations isn't a defense for management personnel. Good. Maybe other corporate hotshots will think twice before putting workers at risk. We fished in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun reflect off the water. This was what I'd been working toward for 23 years. Not just financial security, but the peace of mind that comes from knowing you did the right thing when it mattered. My phone buzzed with a text message. "Owen, this is Reed Coleman. I know we had our differences, but I'm job searching and could really use a reference from someone who understands my management style. Would you be willing to write a LinkedIn recommendation?" I read the message twice, then showed it to Rachel. "Are you going to answer him?" she asked. "The shift log speaks for itself," I said, putting my phone away. "Some things don't need a response." Rachel nodded, understanding in that way kids do when they realize their parents actually know what they're talking about. The equipment never lies, right? "That's right. And documentation doesn't forget." As plant safety director, I've implemented training programs that teach every new hire about the importance of safety protocols. Not just the technical aspects, but the human side. How every procedure exists because someone, somewhere, learned a hard lesson about what happens when you skip steps or ignore warnings. We haven't had a single safety incident in 8 months since the new systems went online. Gas monitoring runs continuously with automatic backup activation. Pressure relief systems operate independently of management override. EPA inspectors now use our plant as an example of best practices for other companies in the region. The union workers tell me they sleep better at night knowing the safety systems can't be compromised by executives who think quarterly profits matter more than getting home alive. Mason Reed says morale is higher than it's been in years. I've got 16 years until full retirement, assuming I want to take it. Maybe I'll stay on as a consultant, help other plants implement proper safety protocols. Maybe I'll spend more time at the fishing cabin, teaching Rachel's future kids how to cast a line and read the water. But for now, I've got work to do. Systems to monitor people to protect and procedures to follow. Because the equipment never lies and the shift log never forgets. And behind every safety regulation is a story about someone who didn't make it home because somebody decided procedures were just bureaucracy. In the end, doing your job the right way isn't about following rules for their own sake. It's about understanding that those rules exist to protect real people with real families who trust you to keep them safe. That's a responsibility I don't take lightly, and it's a legacy I'm proud to leave behind. Sometimes the most dangerous person in your workplace isn't the one breaking rules. It's the one making rules without understanding what they're for. The difference between a professional and someone just collecting a paycheck isn't what they know, it's what they do when management makes the wrong decision.